Welcome to Elizabeth Reads. We are reading the 39 steps, and this is the conclusion. Chapter 9, The Imposter. I glanced at my watch. It was a few minutes after midnight. Carolides had been murdered on the 15th, just as Scudder had predicted. War is inevitable now, said Sir Walter. We shall have to bring Royer's visit forward. Royer? The French diplomat. He'll be taking the details of Britain's military security to France. Can't you cancel it? I asked. No, we must carry on as planned, replied Sir Walter. It's vital to the safety of Britain and her allies in the times that lie ahead. After a few hours' sleep, Sir Walter and I drove to his house in London. It was here that the meeting with Royer was to take place. That evening, I watched nervously from the balcony overlooking the hall as Royer and a stream of well-known officials arrived at the house and walked past into the meeting room. I remained at my post for over an hour, and then at 10:30 the door of the room opened and the First Sea Lord came out. At least that was my first thought. I had seen that familiar face in newspapers and magazines 100 times. The trim beard, the firm fighting mouth, and the blunt square nose. Yet, at that moment, as he glanced up and caught my gaze, I spotted a look of recognition in his keen blue eyes, even though we had never met. As he made a hasty exit, I rushed down the staircase and picked up the telephone. A few seconds later, I was connected with the Sea Lord's residence. Is his lordship at home? I asked. His lordship retired to bed an hour ago, said the servant. He is unwell tonight. It seemed my part in this business was not yet ended. I marched into the meeting room and was met by the questioning faces of the assembled officials. Gentlemen, I announced, the man who just left this room was an impostor. Chapter 10, A Race Against Time. Impossible, snorted Travers, the official from the Admiralty. Don't you see the cleverness of it? I said. You were too interested in other things to question whether or not the First Sea Lord had been invited. It was natural for him to be here, and that put you off your guard. The young man is right, said Royer. His psychology is good. Our enemies have not been foolish. But the fiend heard everything, said Travers. The security plans not only of this country, but also those of France. Then we're done for, I said. No, my friend, said Royer. I know something of the habits of the spy. He delivers his intelligence in person and receives his reward in person. I was filled with renewed enthusiasm. Then, if we can intercept the Black Stone before they leave the country. But we've no way of knowing where they'll leave from, said the War Minister. Suddenly, I had a flash of inspiration. The 39 steps, I cried. The minister looked at me as if I'd gone mad. There was a phrase in Scudder's notebook, I explained. 39 steps. I counted them. 10:17 p.m., high tide. Then we've less than 24 hours to find them, said Sir Walter. Right, gentlemen, I said purposefully. We'll need a book of tide tables. Minutes later, we were at the Admiralty, scanning the locations where high tide occurred at 10:17. At first, it looked a hopeless task. That time covered at least 50 places. We had to narrow it down. Where would a man in a hurry leave for Germany? Somewhere on the southeast coast, I reasoned. That would provide the quickest crossing to Ostend or Antwerp. There were no regular night steamers at 10:17, so they must plan to use a private yacht or boat that would require a high tide to launch from shore. Then there were the steps. It didn't sound like a dock somehow. It must be some place where there are several staircases, with one marked out from the others by having 39 steps. The inspector of Coast Guards was called for, and after a process of elimination, we finally came up with a location. The Ruff. It's a big chalk headland in Kent, explained the Coast Guard man. It has lots of vias on top, and some of them have staircases down to a private beach. I looked around the assembled company. If one of those staircases has 39 steps, gentlemen, then we have solved the mystery. Chapter 11. The 39 steps. By 10 o'clock the next morning, I found myself on a cliff top overlooking a row of quaint villas on the Kent coast. I was joined by Skyfe, an inspector from Scotland Yard with naval experience. He had just returned from a closer study of the staircases of each house. There's only one with 39 steps, he announced. I almost jumped up and cheered at the news. Place called Trafalgar Lodge, he went on. Belongs to a respectable old gent called Appleton, according to the house agent. At that moment, a yacht came into the bay. She looked about 150 tons and was flying a white ensign that marked her as one of our own. Might be innocent enough, said Skyfe. I'll go and investigate. So it was that 30 minutes later I watched as a small fishing boat made its way to within a few feet of the yacht. I saw Skyfe looking every inch the local angler call up to the larger craft. Some uniformed crew members appeared on the deck of the yacht, and a brief conversation followed, and then Skyfe departed and was back at my side within an hour. She's called the Ariadne, he said. The officers and crew sound as English as you and I, but... What? I asked anxiously. Skyfe looked thoughtful. There was nothing English about the captain's close-cropped hair or the cut of his collar and tie. That settles it, I declared. It's time I paid a visit to Trafalgar Lodge. It was just after 9 o'clock that I made my way up the path of that humble little villa. A search warrant from Skyfe nestled in my breast pocket next to my racing heart. The door was answered by a young maid. I told her my name was Smith. After leaving me alone in the hall for a moment, she returned. I was ushered into a large drawing room overlooking the garden with the sea beyond. But it wasn't the view that first caught my eye as I entered the room. It was the 3 figures in evening dress standing before me. Their features may have been subtly altered by the use of false hairpieces, but I was convinced that these men were the trio who had held me captive in Scotland. The maid introduced me and withdrew. "Mr. Smith," said the white-haired old man claiming to be Appleton, "I don't believe I've made your acquaintance." "Save your breath, sir," I said with all the courage I could muster. "The game's up. I have here a warrant for the arrest of you 3 gentlemen." The old man looked shocked. "Arrest?" he said. "Good grief, what for?" "For the murder of Franklin P. Scudder on the 11th of June, I replied. The tall man raised an eyebrow. "Oh, the Portland Place business. I read about it. But you're quite mistaken," he said nonchalantly. "I, for one, was in a nursing home at the time." "I was out of the country," said the stocky fellow, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "And I dined at my club until late that night," added the old man, stroking his white beard. For a split second, I wondered if I'd made the most terrible blunder. "So, you see, you are mistaken, young man," said the old man respectfully. "Now, if you don't mind, we are late for an engagement." I decided to take a chance. "I'm most terribly sorry, sir," I said, removing my leather glove and extending my right hand. "No hard feelings?" Instinctively, the old gentleman removed his white evening glove to shake hands. In that instant, he realized his mistake, but it was too late. Both our eyes rested on the 4th finger of his bare right hand. Suddenly, he kicked over a table and produced a revolver from his pocket. "Schnell, Franz!" he cried. "Das Boot! Das Boot!" The tall man and his compatriot made a dash for the door, but ran straight into Skyfe's men, who were stationed outside. The old man fired a shot at the police, and Franz managed to struggle free. I lunged at the old man and tackled him to the ground, sending his weapon flying from his hand. I dragged him to his feet just in time to see Franz descend the steps to the waiting yacht. "He is safe," cried the old man. "You cannot follow in time. Der Schwarzerstein has triumphed." "Not for long, my fine friend," I said, as I clinked a pair of handcuffs around my prisoner's wrists. "You see, for the last hour, the Ariadne has been in British hands. Those steps lead straight to the hangman's noose." As you will know, Sir Walter was proved right. War was declared a few weeks later, and I joined up immediately to fight for king and country. But I still think I'd done my best service before I even put on my uniform. That's the end of 39 Steps. Join me next time. Bye-bye.